Let's try creating another pivot table using our GPA SAT data worksheet that we were just working in. So here, what we'd like to be able to do is we'd like to be able to create a pivot table that lists the weighted GPA of the top 10 students in descending order. And then what I want to do on top of that is find out on average how many days late absent those top 10 students have, right? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go to Insert, Pivot Table, and it picks Table 1, which is our table that it named itself, in a new worksheet. That's good. Click OK. And student ID is the unique identifier for the student, so I'm going to take that and throw it down into rows. So student ID is in rows now. And let me zoom in. Let's take the weighted GPA here and throw it into values. And notice it says sum of weighted GPA, right? By default it does a sum. The real question is, if I change this to an average, does it matter? So I'm going to copy these first 5 students, come over here, Control-Alt-V, V values, hit enter. So over here I just have a bunch of numbers. Over here it's calculating, right? It's pulling it from the table. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to change this to change the value field settings to an average. Click OK. Notice it did not really change it. That shouldn't surprise you because we put each student in a row. So because there's already a weighted GPA, it's already an average. Taking the average of that average is going to be the same. It's just one record, right? We don't have multiple students for the same student ID. So I'll leave it at average now, since that makes a little more sense, I think. Get rid of that guy, don't need him. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to look at the top 10 in descending order. So remember, we can do that by coming over here, and we can do sort largest to smallest. That's one way we could do it, right? But there's a better way. If you come over to where the row labels and this little drop down is, click on it, and I want to do value filters. So come over to value filters, and we want the top 10 performers in terms of highest GPA, weighted GPA. So come down and we'll see that as we scroll down through here, we get one at the very bottom that says top 10. Click that, and by default it's the top 10 items by, we only have one thing in values. That's where it's getting us average GPA, so that's good. I could change it to 9, 8, right? I could also change it to the bottom, which is nice. But I want the top 10, and I click OK. So now notice it's filtering it for the top, this, right? But they're still not sorted, so now I want to do sort largest to smallest. And we see that student ID 396 has the highest weighted GPA. The overall grand total right here, average, right, is 6.00. So then the second thing we said for this was we're interested in how many days absent they were. So if I come back over to my value, my pivot fields, days absence down at the bottom, I'm going to stick that into values, right? And notice that this down here is the sum of the days absent. So over those 10 students, they missed a combined total of just 8 days, right? So we know that 8 divided by 10 is 0.8. But if I instead pick like top 9, that math gets a little harder. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to value field settings, and I'm going to do average again, and click OK. And notice the values for each student didn't change because, again, each student is one row in the data set. So the average and the sum are the same since there's only one of them. So in this case, it works. We find the average missed days of the top 10 is 0.8. I got some zeros, some ones, some twos. Right? So that looks at, gave us a chance to filter by the top 10 on the value fields, value settings, sort values, and then we could also find out changing this stuff to average to get a different way of looking at the data.